I am so excited to have Cheryl Hall back on our podcast today to answer some questions. Cheryl, welcome back.
Hi, good to be back.
Wow, when we talked about your daughter's story and your story of how she was almost in the arms of an online predator, and not only had she been being tracked by him, but by 12 men
Mhm.
online. And on her 18th birthday, she's
Yes.
ready to get on a plane in Vegas and fly into what we now know is a horrible predator's arms.
Right. After
Um,
going through a whole ton of sexual assault before that, right? Like she was already a very fragile victim.
yeah, can you encapsulate for our audience just to remind them what she had been through, why she went and had a 10-month stay at a mental hospital facility?
Sure.
Yeah, tell us just that little bit so they'll be caught up and we'll go right into our questions
So
and
she met a
answers.
boy. She was, I think, 16 or 17. He was 15 or 16, just a year younger in school. It turned out to be kind of a psychopathic predator, actually, whether or not he was a child. Like it was bad. And it turned out to be really abusive. She was raped and didn't recognize it as rape because some neurodivergent stuff was going on. And, she was sort of caught up in like what the movies show as rape, not someone that or is just coercive and, threatening you, right? Like she thought
Right.
just because she was afraid and capitulated that maybe it wasn't. But she didn't find any way out of the situation. She felt like she couldn't tell me because of our religion and because of, purity culture and things. And so she drowned herself in about 4 inches of water in the bottom of a shower at a safe, it's called a safe place, is what it's called, but it's basically like teenager timeout at
Okay.
a mental health facility. Like it's linked with a mental health place here. Like it's a helping families thing. This wasn't just a random place, right? They found her, resuscitated her, and then because of she'd had one other attempt and had a short stay at the same place Paris Hilton went, which
Oh,
was
wow.
just as awful as Paris Hilton described, even though they want to say it's just fine now, it's not. But because of the intensity of her commitment to, because it's supposed to be impossible to drown yourself, like especially where you could just stand up. So the judge said, okay, she needs to be in the state mental hospital. There's very limited beds, but at that point, it's open ended. The commitment is until they feel differently. Like we didn't know. Like it could be into adulthood or not, or whatever. After she got out, realized that what it was rape. She had an amazing therapist that helped her realize this. Um, she ended up doing what's called recapitulation of trauma,
Yes,
which
I
is
wrote that
where,
down. I wanted to
yeah.
have that explained a little bit more. Yes.
So I'll explain it in a different way. When she was 4, and she's gonna hate this story. When she luckily we're keeping her anonymous, but when she was 4, she had some bowel trouble, was extremely impacted and uh, what's the word? Constipated. And her pediatrician told us to give her an enema. Well, for the next week and a half, all of her stuffed animals were lined, butt up in the air, and she went through and would play enema as a way to process what was fairly I mean, it wasn't totally traumatizing, right? But it was
Yep.
something that she was like, I don't get what just happened. Like, I have no frame of
Yeah.
reference for this.
Yeah.
So,
4-year-olds don't have language and understanding, which is
mhm.
why anything with their private parts of their body is so disruptive.
Right, right. So that is recapitulation of trauma, where they have to sort of play act it out and put themselves into that situation and sort of repeat it until they can process it. And that's what ended up happening, where she felt powerless and taken advantage of. And so she kept putting herself in situations to pull herself back out to prove that she wasn't powerless and that sort of thing. And in doing that she had already been encountering online predators. I mean, as you know, like any girl with a social media account, it's like what, 12 minutes before the predators show up from the time you start the social media account.
And
So,
can we please reiterate that?
yes, like,
This is such an epidemic online right now. It is
yes,
just how almost all predators other than those that are in your home, your congregation, your neighborhood, your school, your
Absolutely.
community center. This is how they're finding
Right, and
kids.
they
Yeah.
ran a test thing where they had a dummy account set up, all these different ages and genders, and they said that, the most prolific, I guess, of attempted contacts was an 11-year-old girl, and I think and I cannot remember, I might be quoting this wrong, but as I remember it, it was about 12 minutes, and the
Mm.
online predators showed up. So, if and just for the audience, the answer isn't no online account because she created the online account at school. Someone showed her how to make an email address.
Yep.
I thought I was controlling everything. I thought it had locked down because I already understood the dangers of social media. I thought that I had sort of covered that base. And I think that's a really good segue into why we're here because I sort of left it with like, great, there's nothing we could do. Have fun, have a happy life, you know? And
Yeah.
I didn't want to end it that way. So
No, and I think it's really important that we do talk about the things that are the the underlying questions and answers to what can we do
yeah.
and what are we not seeing and how do we prevent as best we can age appropriately,
Mhm.
because now you have a daughter that's from, 4 and now has a boy, in her tween years and, all of these years, there's been some trauma
Yes. Mhm.
resulting in, "Okay, we're gonna put her in this teenage timeout," then she tried to drown herself, so we'll put her in this other one, which was horrible, which there are no right now, there haven't been regulations on those, tough love or those whatever kind of places they say they are. How do we know? Is there any way to know?
Um, yes and no. What I have determined in all of this is until you have had someone in the mental health sort of machine,
Mhm.
you're not aware. I didn't know, like when I took her to the hospital. So we kind of mixed up the timeline. When she drowned, that was actually her second attempt.
Oh, her second time.
Yeah,
Okay.
she had had a first attempt that landed her at the Provo Canyons, and then, and it was kind of half-hearted, and then she ran away, which landed her at the teen sort of timeout place, and then while she was there, she tried to drown herself, which ended up with her going to University of Utah, pediatric mental health, BMed, which then they went from uni, they decided that the attempt was severe enough and intentional enough and determined enough that the 2 weeks was not going to be sufficient, which I had been fighting for the whole time. I knew 2 weeks was not going to be sufficient in the first place.
Right.
So then they admitted her straight from uni over to the Provo mental hospital. So the first thing to understand is in our area in Washington County, we well, and I wouldn't even say Washington County, but in our area of the state, there
The
is
state of
no
Utah.
yeah, the state
Mhm.
of Utah, there is no pediatric, BMed, like, there isn't. So I took her into the ER thinking, well, she'll go to BMed, right? No. They said there's a list of, 4 to 5 hospitals that are pediatric that we will send her to. And the first one with the bed opening was Provo Canyon. So this was the hospital choosing Provo Canyon, the place that Paris Hilton went, not me. We just simply do not have enough resources for pediatric mental health. I would say in any state, but I know from experience here in this state. She was unable to speak to me truthfully about what was happening. She was being watched, she was being punished if she ever told what was actually going on, which is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying that, the thing that got me to understand that there were problems, besides the fact that she wasn't really behaving like I expected her to, was she had full body hives. And when I would call the doctor to talk about it, he was like, no, she's fine. And I'm like, I just went and saw a visit. They also control when you can talk to them. You only get like a half hour every like once a week in person, or it was so limited in what I could how I could interact with her. And she said they had someone sitting right there monitoring what she was telling me on the phone.
When you tell me something like that, it makes me really scared too, because that's the one thing that you hope is that they will tell you the truth and that you will believe them.
This is the availability and the option for pediatric mental health care. And again, remember, this is not someone that's like, well, I'm just having some trouble. Like this is an acute treatment facility for like just attempted, right? And so I think what I would do is probably, oh, I'm sorry, let me turn off my phone. I think what I would probably do is I would have a process where if the child is ever in a situation where they feel like they can't talk or they can't be honest, I would have something like a code word or a code phrase that would not alert the people around them. But when you understand that the likelihood of them needing mental health care and also needing those same skills. So that's what I would do in that situation if I had it to do over, where I could say something like, if you're unable to speak to me, tell me the phrase. And then she could say that. And I could then respond with, like, there's different phrases like, is someone listening? Or, um, are you physically safe? Are you physically being harmed? Like those sorts of things. And
Sorry, that's
that's
my dog,
okay.
stop it.
Uh, those are the types of things that I think. I mean, it's one of those. I go back to like being a Gen Xer. You know that I always thought that quicksand would be a much bigger problem in my adult life as a Gen X child. And so, you don't think of these things, or you watch movies like Taken and it's this extreme
Yeah.
whatever. But knowing that those skills can still come in handy because anyone, anywhere, at any point could be holding your child captive in front of your face and you not understand and them not be able to communicate to you, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really great piece of advice and wisdom because think of how often a social worker might show up at somebody's front door because there's been a complaint or somebody said something somewhere to someone at school who told the counselor who then, whatever. Somehow someone shows up and yet the perpetrator, the abuser, answers the door with the big smile and the charming
Yeah.
personality and the, oh my word, we just watched this movie on TV. I think that's where my daughter's getting this, and then shuts the door when they think everything is fine, and the abuse only gets worse for
Right.
that child. So if that child had some way of, if they're interviewed, like let's say the social workers come in, of being able to say something that, I mean, and I know the social worker wouldn't necessarily know that, but
Right.
what if the mother did? What
Right.
if the mother, who also is probably being abused by that person, could be being, mentally, emotionally abused, had a way for that child to say those safe words like, "Are you safe?" "Yes, but I sure wish we could go for ice cream."
Right.
So
Right.
she said, "Yes, I'm safe," but the "I wish we could go for ice cream" means I'm not safe, someone's hurting me, I'm scared to say anything in front of these people that are in this room or on this online community or on this airplane or in my school class. That's really brilliant. I
Yeah.
think in front of a principal or people of authority, and for all children of any age.
Yes.
I still am like that. People that are in authority, I have a harder time speaking my mind
And
to
that
them.
I believe that comes back to neurodivergence and the rigidity of social rules that
Yes, and I wanted to
occurs.
talk about that next. That was the next word on my paper is neurodivergence.
So I do
Let's
want
go there.
well, I wanna come back to this thing because
Okay.
if it's the parents abusing, then the child doesn't get taught. But if there is a healthy parent out there, I think the thing that we really need to drill down is that, um, if CPS ever approaches them, that 100% they will be safe. 100% they need to tell the truth. 100% a teacher, a principal, or CPS or the police. There needs to be this absolute perfect trust in these individuals, which again can be, exploited. We do know that, but usually at a later age. Usually, in a later age, older child situation. So early childhood, I would say absolutely build that implicit trust of, um, nothing bad is going to happen to you. And if there is something bad, occurring that they're asking about, that maybe you're afraid for
Mhm.
something bad, like you don't want your dad to go to jail, you don't want your mom to go to jail, right? If it's
Right, even
if
if they
it's
are abusing.
right, if it's presented in the it hurt people. So the concept is you need to teach your children that hurt people, right? People don't hurt others unless they themselves are hurt. And then that you
Yeah.
can introduce the concept of these people don't punish the people you love who are hurting you, they get them help so that the hurt stops. And if they can understand that concept, um, and again, it's not going to be perfect, right? Every child's going to be different, but that's something that I would actually introduce early childhood is implicit trust that way.
And I think what goes along with that is one of the things that is really important in some of our legislative work that we're trying to get through, at some point that every one of those 4 people that you're talking about that a child should be able to completely trust, they need to be trauma informed.
Yes.
They have to go through some kind of, robust certification of being trauma aware and trauma informed because often and I do have some stories of, and they're people that are in their
Yeah.
50s and 60s mostly that the police officer said, "If you're lying, you're gonna
Right.
go to jail," to a 13-year-old, and that's not true, and the 13-year-old recanted and didn't
Yeah.
didn't finish the story and then just didn't talk.
But I did want to say one thing when you're talking about the legislature. I think this is actually really important. I've called CPS now several times on a family member, children of a family member, who I love dearly. And the neglect is so severe, but the control is absolute. And I don't want to give much away, so I'm being pretty vague. CPS has done zero. I'm
Yeah,
in hysterics and tears over the treatment and the suffering that I witness, and CPS has done zero. And I think that we need to address that in legislation because I think
yep,
that CPS only has all or nothing, right? There's not a process where they can say, yes, we've found a problem. We are going to force you to put your children into therapy. We are going to force you to take them to yearly or monthly, as the case may be, if there's some extreme medical neglect, well child visits. But they can't do anything if they don't take them out of the home. So first they have to feel like the children are dying, then they can remove them from the home, then they can get them services. So we have to sit and wait and watch these family members be absolutely destroyed because they're not dying yet, so
ugh.
CPS can't do anything.
Yeah, that's like the worst kind of malfunction inside of a system
Yes.
possible, and we have a lot of systems that do those very things. Unless it is dire and someone's dying, you don't get help. So when there's a child advocacy group formed, there usually is someone from the medical, the legal, the detective, the police parts of that equation, and the social worker and the therapist. And, there's a group of people, and all of those people surrounding that case, surrounding our children and our tweens and our teens and our young adults who are still developing,
Right.
brain
They're
cells,
still children.
and if they've been abused, some of those brain pathways have been wired a certain way that requires a lot of help to rewire so that
Yes.
they don't just step onto a plane, turning 18 today, and I'm going to meet
Yes.
the love of my life, who was a trafficker and a much
Yeah.
older man
Mhm.
and a military man and had all kinds of other things
Yes.
as they arrested him
Mhm.
and on his of all sorts of other child,
Right.
harm
Child
and
images
pornography
and
and
yes.
images and yeah. So, this is getting deep here. So, we're deep into it. So, can you talk about neurodivergence just a little bit more, and then
Absolutely.
let's step into, some of these question answer
Absolutely.
things that we wanna drill
Okay.
down on.
All right. So neurodivergence, there's neurotypical and neurodivergence. A neurotypical person takes a large amount of data, distills it into one point. A neurodivergent person takes one point and expands it into a million different or 100 different possibilities. Neurodivergence includes all levels on the spectrum of autism. It includes ADHD, really anyone's brain who's wired just a little bit differently. Typically, someone who is neurodivergent has a really hard time with black and white thinking, has a really hard time with change, has a really hard time with social rules because the social rules are set in stone. Like when you are neurodivergent, you have to learn to mask to sort of get along in a neurotypical society. And the way you do that is by sort of mimicking what people around you are doing and understanding the social rules. And so you sort of become an expert at kind of acting a little bit. So what you perceive a social rule to be becomes then very important to, like, you internalize it as it is always this way.
Mhm.
So someone who is neurotypical that learns purity culture can very easily deconstruct that and be like, okay, well, there are some situations, right? It's not so extreme. Someone who's neurodivergent would take purity culture and be unable to deconstruct it because that is a social rule. And they have internalized that. And it doesn't matter that it doesn't make sense. The anxiety level is too high to cross what they perceive as a social rule. And so I see groomers will use that social contract against them. Like, don't make a scene in public. That's like the number
Mm,
one social rule, right? If you want to be socially acceptable, you don't make a scene in public.
right.
So that's just kind of an example.
And do you think that, certain children are just more wired towards being neurodivergent, or was
Yeah,
there a diagnosis that she was
there was no
on the
diagnosis
spectrum or anything like that? Okay.
until she was an adult because she was,
Okay.
gifted and talented at masking. So I knew that so some of the clues that I should have picked up on earlier is, a certain affinity or a disgust of textures of clothing, temperature of food, or that sensory thing where she has
Mhm.
really strong sensory preferences. That is a sign of neurodivergence, specifically mostly autism, but, um, it's not something that anyone would have noticed when she was a child. She number 1, she was gifted and talented. But number 2, I honestly believe, and she disputes me on this, but I honestly believe that the subsequent TBI, traumatic brain injuries that she received to her frontal lobe in adulthood actually contributed to how deep her autism is now, how extensive, and it affects her processing now.
That's interesting. That really is a helpful way for me to see what you're talking
Mhm.
about, and I hope others too, because just to be able to identify some of those things would be helpful for knowing what to do next, and so how to circumvent some of the other things, because I think that, certainly with the younger, he was what, a year younger, the boy at
Yeah.
school
Mhm.
who groomed and repeatedly raped and terrorized your daughter
Yes.
using all kinds of things
Mhm.
to get to her. She was more susceptible perhaps because of that, but I think anyone at that age, is susceptible, because if that boy says, "I'm gonna shoot up the school unless you do what I tell you," or you have to
Yeah.
wear red every day, because on that, and would call and actually call her and say, "Are you wearing red? Because boy, if he's going to bring a gun to school, I have to be wearing red so I don't get shot." I mean,
Right.
certainly as she's going through that kind of emotional terror, and then he's calling her out of class and raping her at
Mhm.
school, and
Yeah.
then she's responsible for everybody's life at the school, so he doesn't shoot up the school, so she's wearing red every day. I mean, you look at that kind of thing and the emotional terror that a neurodivergent person would take that one moment in time and what that would turn into. So we have to make sure that all the resources are there if we want to put a stop or prevent, or certainly to help someone heal. So, okay, knowing about neurodivergence, let's talk about, you know, one of the most important, I think, questions and answers that you wanted to make sure you talked about on
Mhm.
this, our follow-up conversation, how that purity culture
Yes.
has an impact. And so I'm just gonna ask you, from your words and your point of view, how would you describe purity culture? How have you seen it in its effect on your life, your daughter's life, and other lives? And where have you gone from that culture into who you are today, and why?
Okay. So purity culture for me and the way we experienced it, it was weird because I didn't really ever subscribe to that. I was always very progressive. And I thought that I was teaching it at home. But again, with neurodivergence, that very black and white thinking, I have said, I've put this child in a classroom with ecclesiastical leaders and they now have authority. It's that authoritarian, right? This is the social thing that it's black and white thinking. She can't critically think yet. And that's my
Well, she's
failing.
too
That's
young.
yeah. She's too young, but also I had not taught her to critically think. I had put my trust in ecclesiastical leaders, not understanding that they may not have been as progressive as I was. So while
Mhm.
I taught that, number one, you dress like a child if you're a child, right? But it doesn't mean that skin is bad. You know,
Right.
it's not going to save you from a predator to wear knee-length shorts. I'm sorry, it's not, and it's on
Nope.
purity culture puts it on the female or the male
Mhm.
or the victim, right? Not the
Yep.
perpetrator. And so that was something that I was like, listen, if I feel like she shouldn't be in short mid-thigh whatever shorts as a child in a certain situation, she shouldn't be in that situation. I need to look at the adults. If I feel that this is an unsafe outfit, it's not because of my child or the outfit, it's because of the predators. So, there is no such thing as unsafe outfit. We're just going to get that out of there. That's all victim blaming stuff, which purity culture does. It puts it
Yes,
on
it's
like
shaming
yes,
and blaming. If there's a shame to it, and then there's a blame to it, and then what follows right after that is there's guilt. No
yes,
matter what happened, I deserved it. It happened because of me, because I
right.
was wearing the wrong thing. That is absolute purity culture at its
At
worst.
its worst, right, right. The other thing is that what happened to me is a stain on my soul, and that is the other part of purity culture. The whole um, you know chastity above all else, next to
Mhm.
murder,
Yep.
no. And what I taught in my home, and again, she was taught differently. When she went to these religious places, she was taught differently. But what I taught her in my home was um, that chastity was important outside of marriage because it was the glue that bonded you to a person. And if you are not ready for children and you are not ready to be bonded forever to this person you know, that you are sleeping with or having sex with, maybe don't, right? This is your sort of benchmark of whether or not it's okay, not if it's a sin. And that the reason behind sort of saving yourself for more of a committed relationship, and at the time I told her marriage, but saving it for more of a committed relationship was because you can't control pregnancy happens. Like, do you want all of a sudden 3 months later you find out this is a narcissistic abuser? And there's too much risk associated with uh for me anyway, and my personal thoughts. I don't, change anyone else's priorities. But for me, it's something that I find very serious, very amazing, and something that I don't want to be bonded to a random person. Like it involves my feelings too deeply. And the risk of having a child with somebody that I do not want to have a child with. Like those were the sort of boundaries that I put around sexuality is like, wait until you're in a committed relationship with someone that you are ready to have a child with. And that's when you can sleep with them. I mean, do all the other things, right? Like that's fine. But when it comes time for intercourse, that was where I was putting it. Now, what she was being taught at school, or I'm sorry, at church and religious outings was the whole chewed up gum theory, right? Someone else has chewed up your gum and no one else is going to want it, or
Mhm.
it's next to murder, which, by the way, is the reason that she drowned herself because she had had in her mind, she had had sex and now she was ruined. And the same as if she had murdered someone. So it's better that she die. And that's what
Yeah,
she was being
that
taught.
yes, that if you are unchaste,
Right.
that is comparable to the sin next to murdering someone, and I think that that's been taken out of a lot of literature, by the LDS Church, but I still know that that is a pervasive way that control
Mhm.
and people teach their children, and that I see it showing up all the time, and that purity culture in that way, taught that way, does more damage than
Right.
if you would say, "Here's the way that you practice safe sex so that you don't get pregnant," or if and I too am like you, I've always said, at least to my own child, I said, "Look, sex is a commitment.
Mhm,
It commits you in a way that all the other things that you could do besides having intercourse with
mhm,
somebody, are fun, and your body is a wonderful thing, and all these feelings are great, but
uh-huh,
when it comes to intercourse and a girl couldn't get pregnant,
mhm.
you change somebody's life, and you also change the DNA of what your connection is.
Sure.
And you may take it more lightly, but that girl probably takes it more seriously just because of the way that most men and women's brains develop. I mean, have you ever read the book
Mhm.
Brain Sex?
No, I need to.
Okay, it's so interesting. It's not just all about sex like we're talking about.
Right.
It's about the sex of a male and a female's brain and parts that light up and how they see things and everything from backing out a car where a man's brain, the way that his eyesight sees has
Mhm.
a longer view, so he can tell he's not gonna hit the thing, and your view is shorter because of the way your eyeballs are wired to your brain. I thought that was so
Oh,
interesting.
that's
That's why you're
crazy.
screaming like, "You're gonna hit it, you're gonna hit it," and he's like, "I'm not gonna hit it," and he doesn't hit it.
Right.
And so when I saw that example in the book, I read the book, I was so fascinated by it, and I don't know, maybe it's outdated science, but I read it a number of years ago. It really was interesting, and I thought, in teaching my own son, and
Mhm.
since we're talking, to parents, on this subject, it was always like, I just know from my own experiences, and maybe it's because I was abused, I don't know, that that particular thing makes me think you're in love with me, or
Right.
makes me think that we have a future together, or makes me think I want to have babies. It makes me think and feel differently, and it may not do that to you, I don't know.
Right.
But for me, I was very much the same way, like, that one thing,
Well, even if
it
I
can change
don't
somebody's life.
right. And I don't know necessarily that it's like, "Oh, we're going to get married and have babies if we have intercourse, and that's how you feel about me." I think that there is a more what it does for a woman is it unlocks a deeper emotional because it is a very intimate thing, and so it
Yes.
unlocks deeper emotional intimacy. And then I
Mhm.
always talked about, sexual imprinting. It was really interesting to me that the first time I had a real sexual experience where, and I had kissed a boy and stuff, but I hadn't really, like, gotten turned on or whatever. When I had that experience, that became my type. That's who I married, that's who I
Mm.
dated. So, in my mind, like, that was a very real thing because that became the turn on, and if someone's first sexual experience is, predatory, you find that they tend to keep going after these are you okay? Predatory
Yeah,
men.
sorry, I dropped something.
Um, and I see that. I see that. I called one of my siblings, my sister, I call her have you heard of shark bait on, like a whatever? I call her narc bait because she tended to keep coming up with all these narcissists, and I'm like, "What is going on?"
Mm.
And where's this pattern, and that's just where my brain goes. So yeah, purity culture, I definitely tried to teach something different, but she was so ashamed and so shut down and so life is over, my life is worthless, I now have no more worth because I did this. She wasn't even thinking of it could be rape, and I want to come back to the neurodivergence of that. She wasn't think of it as rape because of her neurodivergence, because of the way it's portrayed in the media, and I never counter taught that. So she was
Mm.
like, rape is this black and white thing,
Mhm.
not I'm in fear for my life. So in her mind, I agreed to it, so it wasn't rape. Well, yes, if you think you're going to die, but again, and there's an ecclesiastical leader that has put out, a speech on this that basically said that it's better for you to die fighting off the person trying to take your virtue than allow it to happen, which I absolutely do not agree with. But like you said,
Nor do I.
even if it's not actively current in LDS teachings or any other church's teachings, doesn't mean other people weren't taught that, don't remember it,
Yeah,
aren't using it. Like, it's out there for anyone to,
absolutely.
and when we set up this authoritarian society of, and I call it, I heard this somewhere and it fits so well. vertical morality, right? God,
Mhm.
husband, wife, children, right? Like that's the authority line. With
Right.
that, whoever taught you is now the authority. Instead of making you the authority where it's a horizontal morality where you look at the people around you, see who it affects around you, and you yourself are centered in how it affects me and you become
Yeah.
the authority on what is good for you, right? And so to set someone up in an authoritarian culture who's neurodivergent, they are going to take that literally as gospel. I mean, it's in a
Literal.
church, but literally as gospel, right? As if God said it to you, like that
Yes.
level of authority. And someone else who may be neurotypical, even some neurotypicals will still take it that way, but they may be able to naturally critically think. But if you haven't actively taught your child to critically think, and if they hear something that doesn't make sense or doesn't sit with them or somehow hits sideways, that even if it comes from somebody they should trust, it's still just a human. It's not God,
Right.
right? That is what I didn't teach. And that's where even though I was teaching her different, I set up that line of authority. Well, guess who's above me? God, right? So no
Mhm.
matter what I was teaching in the home, this teaching pushed mine aside because I was under that umbrella of vertical morality that I had set up in our culture. So that would be the other thing that I would do is I would not perpetuate vertical morality. I would not perpetuate an authoritarian culture. I would teach my child
I
horizontal
love that, and I love that you called it a horizontal
morality.
authority because we wanna talk about enthusiastic consent
Yes.
and consent in general, and that enthusiastic that I am my morality and my moral compass. I am in charge of my body
Uh-huh.
and my things, and that horizontal thing is just makes so much sense to me, and the vertical thing makes so much sense to me as well because I too, being raised in that vertical morality, felt like I had something to confess and went into my bishop at 16 when I realized the aliens weren't real and that
Mhm.
I felt like I had participated willingly, and luckily for me, I had a bishop who was also a dear friend of our family and
Good.
my dad and mom's friends, and they ate dinner and went out, they were
Mhm.
other friends. We did have other friends besides the Birchtolds, and he practically crawled over the desk to hug me and go, "No, no, no, you didn't do anything wrong, you didn't do anything wrong." But that's the idea that you get, and I'm not neurodivergent. I'm, not. And so for anybody that is raised in any religious culture where you are taught God knows all, and then maybe there's Christ, and then maybe there's husband, and then maybe there's wife, and then maybe there's children,
Well,
you don't
ecclesiastical
get it.
leader, then
Yeah.
husband, then
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Ecclesiastical leader,
Mhm.
sorry, put
Yeah.
that person in there, and then dad and mom and then kids. It just there's so many reasons why your kids will never be able to tell you and talk to you about anything.
Because they don't
They're
perceive it as wrong because you've told them that this is the rule to determine if something is wrong, right? Check with God. Well, you have to
yeah,
go through all these layers before you get to God, and the information may be, you know, and
right, and how many people use that? How many times do you see
Mhm,
abusers who have used, God in the name of God and in
mhm.
the
Capacity.
a capacity of being, I am the leader, I am the patriarch, I am the person who knows what we're supposed to do, and this is how we do it, and
Mhm,
you do what I say. I mean, it's used in domestic violence,
mhm.
which generally are people who've been abused before too. They just one more situation that
Dark bait.
welcome, open the door.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. So, I just think that this is such an important conversation, and somehow on the other side of my own, religious beliefs
Mhm.
and my own faith, there are things that I think are so good for myself and for other people that have been in my life because there's something about having something to hold on to and to have hope and a
Sure.
bigger picture. There were things like that that also were very important to me, but this thing is something that is completely not helpful.
Yes, it is.
That's the problem. It is
That's
abused.
Mhm.
That power is abused so often.
We see that when people are like, "Why would there be so many predators in a church?" Like, look at the Catholic priest thing. It is
Yeah.
literally a function of the machine of vertical morality. Like, it's
Yep.
set up to protect predators. You can't question God. You can't go up the line, right? So
Right.
if you're set up with that belief system, and I don't believe every religion has that belief system, but I do believe that the majority of them perpetuated, or at least the people um, of an older generation perpetuate that. I
Mhm.
mean, it's part and parcel of a patriarchal society, right?
Oh,
If you
absolutely.
give a mother resources and money and whatever, she does not use that to serve herself. She looks around at the people
Mhm.
around her. Where patriarchy, you give a man power and money, what do you see happen? It's literally in the news every day, right? We have endless
Yep.
examples in front of us. And not every man, not every, I'm going to say that, not every
No, of
man, no,
course not.
but
But enough
enough, right? Right.
that it's a problem.
Right. We gotta treat all
And
the
enough men in power that it's a
exactly,
real problem.
exactly,
And that's,
exactly. They
you
don't
know
so that patriarchal line of like God to you, that vertical morality, you are dang lucky if you have very honest and integrity individuals between you and God. And that's what I think ends up separating who ends up being abused versus who doesn't. I call it well, in ecclesiastical sense, I call it bishop roulette, where like you had this experience of this wonderful bishop that was just like, oh my goodness, no, 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 like I'm gonna literally claw through walls to like get to your brain that it is not your fault. Where you might have another bishop that's like, yeah, you should have died, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
that's just bishop roulette. You're kind of left with whatever individual person's impressions are. And I say men because men are the one
Absolutely.
that they give the power to. It could be women as well, right? It's not
Yes.
isolated, but you don't have that power. In the religion you and I were raised in the LDS faith, you
Right.
don't have that power as a woman. It is a man. So
Absolutely. Yep.
you kind of have to play roulette with that. And I think that personally I got really lucky. I although I had, weird instances with boys my age in intermediate school, I never personally was seriously sexually traumatized. I'm
Mhm.
also extremely tall. Like people walking up to me are not like, well, there's a victim, right? Like I,
You are
I
tall.
am
I've
no
met
tall.
you face to face.
I'm tall. I'm a big person. I take up a lot of space. And so it doesn't, I don't strike
You
the
take up a lot of good
oh,
space.
thank
You're a
you.
good space taker-upper. I met Cheryl at Yin on Fire where
Yes.
I got to present, and it was a great experience to meet
It
you and to
was
talk to you that day, and I knew you had to be on the podcast.
well, I you were the
What a
only speaker
story.
I went and saw. I
Oh.
was in the vendor village and you were the one that I went there for actually.
Oh,
Because I felt a kinship and anyway, I'm really
yeah.
happy to be on your
That's
podcast. I'm thrilled beyond words that this is like my second time and
awesome.
it fills me with such joy to talk to you and I feel like when I was going through all of these, I remember thinking, well, in any bad situation in my life, I remember going, okay, well, if I have to go through it, at least let my experience help somebody later, right? If I can't
Right.
escape this, if I've got to just, the trauma, there is such a thing as secondary trauma, and I want to talk on that as well. When your child has something happen to them, it happens to you. If
Mhm.
you see your child get hit by a car, you have been hit by a car. If your child
Yeah.
has been sexually assaulted, you have been sexually assaulted. And I learned that in a group when we went through the Children's Justice Center with my daughter and everything in prosecuting this boy. Um, I learned that in the adult, like the parent help group, the support group that we were part of. And my husband, who is, I mean, you think I'm big, right? He's really big. He's like, well, he's 6'1", but he's very burly. He's very broad
Mhm.
shouldered, very manly, very intimidating. Like he's not ever been a victim in his entire life, not for 1 second. He can't even process that position in society. So
Right.
he had to deal with the emotional fallout that he himself had been raped
Mm.
because his daughter had. And that was really difficult for him to process that vulnerability. And when I say like, oh, I haven't had to go through it, I still went through it because it was my daughter, but not
Yeah.
me personally. But again, luck of the draw, that vertical morality. I just happened by chance to end up with very honorable people in that line. And like you said, it's everywhere, right? Like, how rare is that? There's a reason that, it's really rare to run across a woman who hasn't had some sort of very serious sexual trauma happen to her. And I believe that's
Right.
why. So,
And I do too. I totally agree with that. I mean, because I've had the total opposite experience,
mhm,
later in my life, married and my son's father, coming out to Bishop and this happened, this thing happened, and how all of a sudden it was like he had the plague,
uh,
and a terrible example of a bishop.
right,
But
ecclesiastical authority.
yep,
Yeah,
and totally was so damaging
yeah,
in every way. So, yeah, I luckily in my life, I think most I've had a balance of experiences which make me empathetic and understanding, and I usually can see myself in almost everyone's story. I really love the idea that you put down as a question, let's talk about enthusiastic
yes.
consent. Can we do that before we run
Yes,
out of
yes,
time
before we
today?
run out of time. Okay, so enthusiastic consent. So my daughter consented, but not really, right? She
Right.
consented under duress and coercion, and that doesn't count as consent. And
No.
I don't necessarily believe, so although the boy was a predator and really did not care if she consented or not, and obviously coerced her heavy duty, um, I don't believe we would have so much child on child perpetration if enthusiastic consent was taught as part of health class, right? Or
Mhm.
even just part of school of like, oh, you wanted to play tag with that person that didn't want to play tag. Like, you don't, this is not enthusiastic consent, right?
Mhm.
It isn't just a okay, yeah. If I tell that to you, you're going to be like, that was not enthusiastic, right?
Yeah.
There's a difference between well, yeah, okay, versus
I guess.
yeah, you're right, um
Yeah.
real consent is enthusiastic consent. If there's not enthusiasm, then there is, it doesn't matter which percentage of no there is, if there is
Mhm.
any percent of no. If it is not 100% yes, it is not consent. And I think that's something that we need to teach everyone regarding anyone's body, anyone's, I saw an allegory once where they talked about it, drinking tea. You offer somebody a
Oh,
tea.
I saw that
Yeah.
too. I
Well,
love
you
that
used to
video.
do it and you accepted tea last time. Well, let me just open your mouth and pour it in for you, right? Like, it's still uncomfortable, even if they don't open your mouth and pour it in. If they're pushing it at you, if they're cajoling you, right? It's still damaging. And I use that
Yes,
with my grandson, right? If he's like, not in the mood for a hug, I'm like, okay, well, you know, what can I do? And
next
and
time.
with my neurodivergent daughter, she has what she calls no hug days. And I know where she's like sensory overstimulated or whatever, and I can tell she's having a hard time. I'll say, "How do you want me to show you love? I feel like giving you a hug, but you said that you're not open to that. How can I show you that I'm loving and supporting for you right now in this moment? How can you receive the love I would like to give you?" And then that gives her the power and control to, like, that's so I try and practice that even with
Think of another
children.
way.
Yeah, bodily autonomy of, like, you are in charge of your body. No one else gets to determine, this.
Just
Self-esteem
just
issues.
yeah, self-esteem plays a big part of this, and
Mhm,
that's why I think enthusiastic consent can help with self-esteem,
yeah,
esteeming oneself to look inside and go, "What do I really want? What do I really feel? What
mhm.
I get to be in charge." And I just don't think we teach that enough to certainly I don't feel like it was ever really talked about for
No,
girls. I mean, but I'm old, maybe it's better today, maybe there's more of that,
I
but there's still
I mean, my
a
daughter went through it,
very
so
right, and she's, that age, she's
yeah,
not that old,
she's not that old.
and so we look at that and I think, "Okay, if we could do that in all areas," like you said, if you don't feel like playing tag and you're not 100%
Mhm,
enthusiastic about, "Yes, I love tag," or, "Yes, I love volleyball," or, "Yes, I love kickball," or oh, yes, I want to stay in and do art in my
mhm,
with my classroom teacher instead of I've heard so many stories of that special student, the
mhm,
smartest student, the most creative, the most talented, the most beautiful, staying in and then getting groomed and
mhm,
abused by teachers in that way. There has to be something enthusiastic that everybody could see.
mhm,
Like other teachers or other students would go, I don't think they really want to stay in. I need to
mhm.
tell somebody there's not the enthusiasm that should be there,
Right.
they wanna be out here playing tetherball,
Right.
or whatever it is. I just think that idea is simple enough that even little kids could
Could see.
get certain pieces of that, and as they grow, understand how it grows
Or
with them,
or in the middle of
and
tag,
boys
you
and girls.
decide, I'm not feeling tag today." Right?
Yeah.
Then you can
Yeah.
exit, right? Like, maybe that was
Yes.
enthusiastic in the beginning, but it's not anymore. Or
Yeah.
maybe you weren't really sure, and then after a while you decide, "You know what? I am sure." Right? I am sure.
Right.
On your own without being badgered, you know, and
Right.
it's
And
not
bullied.
right, and bullied, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely. And exactly. People should look for enthusiastic consent, and I don't really believe that the whole one-on-one adult with a child thing, like, I never, right? Always, to me,
I
that's
agree.
always suspicious. As an outsider, that's always
Yep.
suspicious. I would always be like, "What are we doing here?" Right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't I don't love that at all. And even, I mean, we can't save every single child, right? There are always going to be certain circumstances that somebody's going to slip through. But if there's a parent out there that really wants to up their chances of protecting their child, these are the things that will do the
Mhm.
most help, right? You
Yeah.
think control social media. Well, that's what I thought too. You think,
It's impossible.
I
Sorry. Now it's totally impossible.
absolutely.
I mean, I thought at one point, yeah, I would do that too. "Oh, my son will never have his own cell phone till he's 16."
I did
You
that.
know?
Didn't work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I know you did.
didn't work.
And you're younger than me, and your daughter's younger than my son was, and it
Incorrect.
was a fight for me to try and keep that, and, it didn't get quite to 16, I think he was 15, but now, I mean, we're talking 8-year-olds. Everybody has a
Sure.
cell phone. They
Yeah.
all have one, and you can do all kinds of parental controls, but as they get wise to the world, they will figure out how to get around you, how to make a different account, all of it. You're not gonna do that, so what we've gotta really do is look at our
Internal.
patriarchal systems,
Yes.
our internal family systems that we have been brought up, and what are our beliefs, and how do we manage what we actually are teaching
Mhm.
to the next generation, and how are we empowering them? How are
Right.
we training them on what consent is, boys and girls? How are we doing these things? And why is some of this not in our educational system? Why is that not in health class and before? It should just be a part of, we talk about bullying. I watch television commercials and I'm always so amazed. There are these wonderful commercials about bullying, and
Mhm.
especially with social media, and like your kids wearing a mask, and they look happy and they're trying their best to fit in. They're doing the little dance online, and then everybody's, oh, that's so cringe, or oh, they're
Mhm.
so stupid. I mean, no wonder she doesn't have any friends, or and these wonderful commercials that make you see, what's behind your child on their social media. But nobody talks about being bullied by an adult.
Mhm.
Nobody talks about being bullied by the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about what bullying actually looks like to a 12-year-old who's been abused by her father since she was 6, and now she finds out in health class that's not okay, but has no
What
idea
to do about it.
where to go
Right.
or where to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, what to do. It's like we do some really good things, and we get backpacks for kids, and we get commercials on bullying, and we get commercials on supporting veterans and animals that are abused, and all these commercials that I see, and I'm still like, there's not one of these that is talking about child
Right.
abuse.
So
I don't
so
know.
I was a substitute teacher for a long time, and one of the classes that I taught was health class. And it was in intermediate school. It was 6th, I think it was 6th and 7th graders, or one or the other. And it was a couple years after I had ended up having to call the police on a child who was bullying my child, and the school wasn't doing anything. And they said, well, they called my child in for sexual assault because she had pantsed her friend, right, in the line at PE. And I was like, well, if that is sexual assault, then the boy who keeps putting his hands on her chest to shove her down the stairs is sexual assault. And they're like, well, I guess if you feel that way, call the police. And I was like, I think I will. I learned in that instant that the police can't do anything until somebody says something. The schools can't do anything because it's not bullying, it's a crime. And so their hands are tied as to how to handle it. And I was like, oh, and they said if it's a crime for an adult to do it to an adult, it is a crime for a child to do it to a child, and the police need to be called because that is who has the power to stop it. And so I went into a health class and I taught them, I said, first of all, I'm going to put these numbers on the board. These are, the helpline numbers of stuff. You all have phones. I give you permission to immediately take out your phones and put these numbers into your phones. If you have any knowledge of anything happening or it's happening to you, if it's a crime or yeah, if an adult doing it to an adult would be a crime and it's happening to you, it's a crime that is happening to you and you need to call and you need to report it and they will take you seriously. And I don't know whatever came of it. I don't know if it ever kept anyone safe. But I was like, nope, this is what I'm
Brilliant.
doing.
Cheryl Hall, you're brilliant. I mean, the fact that you did that, I'm like, okay, we want all your data and we want to put it in our notes and we want every person. I used to be a substitute teacher,
Right.
usually for grade school age kids, but still, I wish there
Still.
was a 123 number. Someday I'm going to legislate for that. Where's the number for kids and young adults and teens and tweens to call when they go, I don't know who to tell and talk to because it's my mom or my dad, or I'm going
Right.
to get, beaten if I say anything, or it's my favorite, everybody's favorite school teacher. I don't know. I'm calling you. I don't know what to do. I don't want anybody to know that I called you because it's just going to make it worse. And then we actually have ways to find out and to help them.
Right.
Because honestly, the minuscule number of kids or teenagers who falsely accuse
Oh,
is practically 0.000.0
and it
one.
comes like it comes out fast.
Yep.
But also, how do they have that in their brain? Where have they seen that? How would they know,
Right.
right? Like something has happened, something
Right.
has been discussed, something. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, I don't. Our number one rule in our house is believe the accuser until you have
Yes.
reason not to, right? Like,
Yeah.
sorry, like you don't
Yeah. Oh,
just
absolutely. That's my mantra. That's what Thrivivors is all about. Be believed.
yeah, yeah,
First and foremost, if there was one thing I could teach anybody, a doctor, a police officer, male, female, all of them, social worker, a parent, an older teen with a younger sibling,
yeah.
it would be believe
Believe them.
them. Believe. Let's start by believing them.
Another thing that I would do in my home, and I don't have a bunch of kids, so it wouldn't work as well with me, but I've seen it on some teacher TikToks. There, she would have like, like quiet time after recess or whatever, and she'll just have a writing assignment. And it says things I wish my teacher knew. And so the prompt is, I wish my teacher knew. And then they're all given post it notes. And it's
Ah,
all anonymous. But that gives, okay, there's someone in my class who is experiencing something that needs intervention. Now it's easy to look around and be like, okay, well, that was a girl's handwriting. That was a boy's handwriting. Here's somebody that is shut down. Here's somebody that, you know, I mean, hurt people, right? It's probably the
yeah.
bully,
Yep.
right? Someone doesn't just beat up on someone unless it's happened to them. They're
Yeah.
just
If
trying
we
to
could help
regain
them
their
right
power.
away,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
then we'd eliminate, however many other kids they're gonna bully. I
Trauma
mean,
is
like,
the gateway drug to all of it.
oh, oh, that's perfect. That's how we're ending this. Trauma is the gateway drug.
Yeah.
Cheryl Hall, amazing.
Thank you.
I loved our conversation. Thank you so much. I'm sure that there might be even more things
Well,
that we could talk about in the future.
sure.
So just start making a list and we're going to have you back because every time we talk, I just am amazed at what your experiences, the things that you've been through, how difficult, how hard, how amazing you've come out on the other side as an advocate, as someone educated from your lived experience with your daughter. And we just want to thank you again for
Absolutely.
sharing all of that with
Absolutely.
us.
And I appreciate being on here. I'd love to come back if there's, I don't know if you guys have comments and question answers, but if there's things that listeners or someone has to ask me specifically, I'm pretty, forthright and
Yeah.
I'll speak
Well,
about it. My
okay.
other passion, and I will say this, I became a health insurance agent specifically to make sure everybody had access to affordable mental health care. And I'm sort of on a mission to make sure that there's no reason nowadays with the ACA law, there's no reason why somebody wouldn't have affordable care. Um, So here's something too. People think that if a job offers insurance that all the family has to take it. That's not true. If it's not affordable for the family to take it, they have access to Marketplace. And there are plans in the state of Utah where it can, depending on your income level, it can cost you $0 to go see a therapist. So I want to put that out there.
And I love that you're on a mission to do that because I was just talking to someone, in our, in the community that, our online
Mhm.
community, Thrivivors, and who was saying, I have insurance and they don't live here in this
Mhm.
state, but, I have it and I can get some mental health care, but I I tried to look at all the different therapists and not one of them was trauma informed,
Oh,
and I need that with her particular experiences. And so she finally found one. She's like, "It's $200 an hour." And even if I show her,
mhm.
and I'm going to do it anyway, she'll give me a discount, but it's still $140 an hour when she sees my limited income,
Yeah,
and I'm like, yeah, people can't afford that. I couldn't afford a therapist. We didn't have that as an option back
sure.
in the day. Mental health care was like, oh yeah, you're crazy. There was no it took a while.
Yeah.
And now that we have this, we should be good looking and having access to great therapists who are trauma informed and specifically, like, I bet your daughter needs someone who is specifically familiar with neurodivergence
Yes,
and
absolutely. I
trauma
was gonna say
and all
that
the
too.
things.
Traditional therapy
Yeah.
doesn't work the same with someone who's neurodivergent, and so you need to
Yeah.
find, if you're neurodivergent, you need to find somebody who understands how to work a neurodivergent brain, not a neurotypical brain. So that was the other thing I was gonna
Yeah.
say. And then also a really powerful word is how. How can this become affordable? How can I get a lower copay? How opens doors. And I did want to put out there too, with mental health therapy for whoever's listening, if you have these really big, copays and stuff, one of the things that the COVID shutdown did is a lot of insurance companies made virtual video visits a $0 copay, or at least a lesser dollar copay. So if you
Mm,
cannot afford
that's
in
good.
person, find out if video visits an option and if that's a lesser cost. So I wanted to put that out there as well.
I love that. Okay,
Okay.
everybody's got some
No
great
reason.
information from this podcast.
And if you think of
No.
anything more, I'll come back on. That I always can talk about this, and I can talk about also, insurance stuff too, and the mental health, how to find a good therapist, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm very
Okay.
strong in that sort of area and zone of life, and
I
yeah.
love that because I know that that is a big issue for people who have survived trauma,
Hmm.
and people think, "Oh, well, it's over. It was a long time ago. What's wrong with you?" And it's
Oh
not what's
no.
wrong with me. It's what happened to you. That's the question. What happened to you and how are we going to help
Mhm.
you
How?
through all of the neurological and emotional and
Right.
central nervous system and all the trauma in the body that's still living there? How are we going to help suss that out and help you be able to hold a job
Mhm.
and hold a relationship and develop the way that will not pass that trauma along?
Sure.
That is the
How?
main question.
Right.
How?
So
So I love that, and we are gonna do some roundtables again. We did them early on, and then we kinda got away from it, but I think we're gonna start doing them, and there'll be, like, several people that
awesome.
kinda have a passion about talking about a certain thing that I think we're gonna try and resurrect those. So thank you again,
Absolutely.
Cheryl, for all of your great information and for being a part of our fabric now here at the Jan Broberg Show,
Yes.
and, I guess what we will do is we will ask how, and we will see you
Yes.
and many, many others on the other side of trauma. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.